panel. Okay. So today what we're going to do is I'm just going to let you know, according to me, how should you be proceeding in your classes from today. Like after my course, how are you going to study at your end? What are you going to follow? How are we going to do it? And typically in business part two, which is the business taxation that we are going to cover, what is the overview, so that once you're studying, you're in a better shape to understand which portion you are in and which are the areas that are really important and how would you emphasize certain things. Okay, so today is just an introductory or orientation session whereby I'm going to take you through whatever is required over the next 2 months, 2 to 3 months, to master this area. In case if you guys have any questions about any topics regarding EA, this is the best time to ask me. Okay. Now see, what is business taxation and how is it different from individual taxation? Many of you have taken individual taxation, but this is by far the most interesting part of entire EA course. But having said that, it is very, very conceptual, so your base has to be very strong. If your concepts are weak, it will start showing in your answers. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? We are going to first talk about the general overview of the EA course, what is the general exam structure, and what is the ideal preparation strategy that I would recommend. Now, see, this is something that I think most of you are aware of. In today's session, I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on part two rather than the general. So, the first one is part one, which is individual taxation. The second part, as you know, is business taxation, and the third is representation before the IRS. Now, if you guys see in your course, I have already updated the schedule for both part two and part three. Now, see, part three is a relatively simpler area, and I feel if you can, it's something that can be clubbed either with part one or with part two. So, what we're going to do is, I'm not going to give you a break after part two. We will take part two, and then with just 1 day gap in between, we'll start with part three. Okay. So, if I look at the schedule, which I have already shared with you guys, uh, so uh, this is the uh, this is the schedule that has been shared with you. So if you look at the Pixalearn LMS, this has already been shared, and not every day, but every week you will see the status. The parts that have been completed, that will be shown as done, and the rest that will be there will be visible to you. We are going to have our classes on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. In between, some of the Thursdays and Saturdays are off because of the fact that there is Ganesh Chaturthi and Durga Puja and Dashera and Diwali during this time. Okay. But mutually, if you feel that we're lagging behind or there's any reason, and if you guys are interested, we can have sessions in between if you really feel that it is possible to take those classes. So is the screen visible, guys? I know this is a little small, but I wanted to show this to you through what has been uploaded. Now, see, if you look at it, this is how the schedule is going to run. We are going to take part two. We are going to start tomorrow, and we are going to finish part two on 27th of October. We are going to take a day off, and then officially part three. Actually, there's not much for the orientation of part three, so you can assume that 1 day I've kept as a gap in my hand. So essentially, we'll start with part three November, and we will end it in the end of November. So you would have December, January, and February as the 3 months where you can take both the papers that we are doing. Okay. So what I would suggest is weekly have a look at the schedule. You will get to know what are the topics that has been done and what are the topics that are still pending and that needs to be done at our end. Okay. So that's number one. So what we're doing is we're planning for the next 3 months, September, October, and November. These are the 3 months in which you're going to study very hard and master both these both the sessions. Okay. So what is it that we are actually going to cover in business taxation? See, individual taxation is typically income from individuals, which we'll be covering in Form 1040. What we're going to do in business taxation is very important. Why? Because you will see that, and again, I'm going to take you to the next slide for this. Typically, major forms of businesses that we will be talking about is C corporation, which is equivalent to issuer, we call them issuers in the US, which is equal to public limited companies in India. That means these are those companies that have their shares listed on the stock exchange. So any company which has an innumerable number of shares and there are no restrictions on the number of shares you can have, and they have approached the public to issue the IPO and get the shares, they are termed as public limited companies in India, and they are termed as issuers or C corporation tax pilots. So this is very, very important. So when you're doing business taxation, C corp taxation, which is again remembered as Form 1120, that's the first taxation form, which is extremely important. Now, after that comes small corporations. Again, this is equivalent to a private limited company in India. That means we have restriction on the number of shareholders in this company, and these companies have raised finances entirely through individual means. They have not approached the public for funding them. Now, you will see that there's a huge similarity between an S corp and a partnership, and what is the difference and the similarity is very important. So, the way we are going to study and the order in which we are going to study, I'm going to talk to you after this slide. Then we have income taxes for estates and trusts. We're going to talk a little bit about retirement plans and exempt organizations. Now, see, these are at the fag end, okay? So these are smaller stuff. These are not very big, but typically, if you look at business taxation, we'll be covering C corps, S corps, and partnership returns. Apart from estates and trusts, a lot of the concepts about estate and trust we have done in part one. uh, but the peculiarity of glide is that every part that you take, you can take in isolation. So there are some overlapping areas. What we are going to do is we are going to cover them again here in part two, so that your concepts gets crystal clear and you are able to relate to the same topics in both part 2 and in part 1. So people who've taken part 1, it is easier for them to relate to certain topics in part 2. People who are starting with part 2 new, be careful now, because when you do part 1 you will find it very easy, because some of the topics that you cover in part 2 will also be needed in part 1. Okay, and then we have this part 3, which is again representation for the IRS. This is a purely theoretical construct. We are going to talk about all the appeals process, what are the duties of people who help you as TRPs. So if you become an EA and you don't take your license, essentially you become a TRP. So you can file the return, but you will not be able to represent your client to the IRS. Now, what do you mean by that? It means that you will not be able to, in case if IRS issues a notice saying that you have to pay me more money, and if you have a client who has whom you have helped to form or file his return, you will not be able to fight for him with the IRS. Okay, so typically people who help or who give you the returns to file, they would also expect you to take it through. They would not want to have somebody else to do the resolution for them. So for that you need a license. Once you have a license, you are called a tax practitioner. And actually, a tax practitioner is equivalent to a CPA or an attorney in the US. So once you get a license, and then once you start, signing returns or helping others to file their returns, you become a tax practitioner. Um, then we have the taxpayer, which is the client. What is a judicial system, what is the appellates process, and what are the penalties. Okay, so all of this we are going to do in part 3, right? So we have September and October, 2 months we will be covering part 2, and in November we'll be doing part 3, and then I would give you a break. You will take the papers for both part 2 and part 3, and then somewhere once we have the new syllabus logging in, we will start with part 1 again. That's the plan. Okay, so if you look at your syllabus, I think all of you guys have your 1 second. What I'll do is I'll skip this part a bit. Okay. Mm, uh, 1 second, guys. Okay. Okay, now see, this is your syllabus. Okay, this is your syllabus. So if you go, this is the what I'm having right now is a virtual book, but you would be having a physical book with you guys. Okay, so I think it'll be better if I take you through this. So these are the topics that you have in part 2. So there are 20 sub modules, and I'll tell you how, in what order we are going to do these modules. So even if you look at the schedule, you will see that we're not following the order of what the client has asked you 100%. You will know the reasons for it, but right now I'll just let you know the concepts. Now, see, these two, which is typically the first and the second one, I would call it introductory concepts for business taxation. So here we'll be covering about what is the due date, what can be the counting methods, what are the various forms of businesses that you can have in. And this is actually a part of gross income. Some of it you've done in part 1. For those who are taking part 2 from scratch, we'll be doing a lot of income, and especially we are going to emphasize on farming income. Uh, we have these business expense deductions. So this part is, again, typically you will see it is something that is related to sole proprietorships. So if I am running a sole proprietorship, I will be filing Form 1040, and there is something called Schedule C. This Schedule C has its own small business. And this is what we are going to do in 3, 4, and 5. Some of it we have done in part 1, and this will be overlapping with part 1. So people who are taking part 2 now, I would want you to register this so that when you're going to go to part 1, this will become easier for you. Again, if you look at these three, especially these two, you will be dealing with capital gains. Again, it's a topic which is there in part 1 also. So essentially, if you cover the first 8 modules of part 2, it is an overlap between part 1 and part 2. Okay. So typically what we are covering is, in case if you have individual business in the form of sole proprietorship, how would you make that return? And also capital gain rules. There is a lot of overlap between individual and business taxation. There's not much difference. So we are going to talk about the capital gains rules. What do you mean by capital gains, by the way? What comes to your mind when I'm referring to capital gains? Yes? What comes to your mind when I'm referring to capital gains, guys? Yeah? Manali? Capital gains? What do you mean by that? Unmute? Are you there? Anali? Okay, I would want you to do this. Yeah.
Yes,
What do you mean by capital gains?
capital gains, salary wages, that is
No,
enough.
no, no, that's not capital gains. Raji, what do you think? What do you think is capital gains?
That's the profit we are getting from selling of properties.
So typically, if you're having some real investments, and
Yeah.
let's say we have stocks, we have jewelry, we have a car and stuff. So if there's anything that we are owning as an investment, and if we are selling it off or we are flipping it, then there is a gain that might come up, and that gain is taxed under Schedule D, which is capital gains, right? So that's capital gain. Manali, is it clear? Yeah. Shreyas, is it
Yes,
okay? Shreyas, is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Then, now see, this is actually something that we'll be doing with part 1 and part 2 together. Now, after this, after we have completed module 1 to 8, what we will do is, we will first do C corporation taxation. Okay. So if I look at this, yeah, wait, let me just remove this first. Then we are going to first do C corporation taxation. That means I'm going to switch over not to partnership, but to C corporation taxation. So then we have these 4 topics. Now 5 topics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are all dealing with C corp taxation, which is Form 1120. Okay. So in tomorrow's class, when you're going to start the first topic, we are going to talk about what is the difference between a C corporation taxation and other forms of businesses. Or let's just say what is so similar between an S corp or a sole proprietorship or a partnership return. That is what we are going to do tomorrow. The first topic that we have tomorrow is forms of business. So we are going to discuss this in great detail. But after we have the elementary concepts for business and capital gains, the first major capital gains, the business taxation that we will cover is C corporation. After we have done C corporation, then we will go to partnership taxation. Now, partnership taxation is actually Form 1065. Okay. So 1140 is individual taxation. 1120 is C corporation taxation. 1065 is partnership. Why are we doing partnership after C corp? You will see there are concepts which are there in C corp, which if you understand, it will be very easy to layer it up with partnership and thereafter the S corps. So we'll do first C corporation, then we will do partnership, then we will do S corporations. The form that you sign is called Form 1120 S. S stands for small corporations. Okay, so C corps, partnerships, S corporations. And after that, we're going to have the estates. So these are discrete topics now, guys. Okay, once we are able to cover till here, then we have covered a substantial part of part 2, and then we'll be doing the estate, the trust, the retirement plan, and the exempt organizations. Okay, so typically, if you ask me, the major deliverables for part 2 would be C Corp, partnership, and S Corp's returns. If you're able to understand the three concepts really well, then I think we'll be sorted. Okay, so this is how, and if you look at the schedule, you will see even in the schedule, this is what we spoke about. See, this was a schedule. See, first we are going to complete till, I think, oh God. I did not give you the dates here, is it? No, the dates are there, thank God. So, if you look at it, we are going to cover till 14th of September. We are going to cover the first basic elements of what is capital gains, what are the various forms of businesses, the basics, and then some amount of deductions and income that is also relevant for individual taxation. Why? Because we are going to do C Corp. We are going to do individual taxation, Schedule C. Then we are going to start with corporations. And if you see, if you have all those 5 topics lined up together, followed by partnership, then the S Corps, and then the last 3 topics together. Okay, so first basics, then individual taxation, then capital gains, then C Corps, partnerships, S Corps. And in the end, the estate tax, retirement plan, and exempt organization. That's how we are going to cover this. Now, see, if you look at your exam pattern, now I hope you know, all of you know about it, but I would still want to take some time because this is the only time when we discuss this at the beginning of the session. Now, see, we are going to have the exam that started on 1st of May and it is going to end in the month of February. So that's the reason why I want you guys to be really at it, okay? Because the syllabus, see, there is not a lot of changes, but I would want the modules that you're studying with still relevant because the moment your modules change, then that's a big deterrent. So try to cover both of these parts by February next year. So be very careful about the dates. About the schedule, about the Prometric website, so that you can. And everybody has a PTIN. Everybody has a PTIN here. Has everybody applied for PTIN? Shreyas, just unmute yourself once.
I applied for it. I have not gotten it till now.
That's okay, but just follow up after 1.5 weeks. The only thing is that it should be applied. So Manali has applied for it. Raji has applied for it. Ashwin has also applied for it. Okay. So the first thing is you apply for PTIN. And then what's important is to understand that February is the last month in which you can be tested for the period. So the law that we'll be testing right now is 2022 laws. So if you look at all the returns that we are going to talk about, all of those returns are 2022 returns. So a year before will be tested in 2023, just a year before. And after April, so after April 2024, you'll be tested with 2023 laws. Okay. It's a 3.5 hours paper. If you look at the time in between, they give you half an hour as a break. If you take away that, basically it's a 3.5 hours paper. You have 100 questions. You have 2 parts, and each part would have 50 questions each. Okay. Now, how do I want you to study? Now, this is important because this is the only time when we discuss this. So typically, after we're through with the class, I will have topics. This is a soft copy of the book that you have with you. Generally, I ensure that there are adequate markings and cross references so that you can relate to the material on your own. So I strongly suggest that come with two colored marker pens in my class and do the markings the way I have done it. Because why two colors? Because I want certain keywords to glare out to you. Okay, so that means after my session, what I would want you to do is see the best part is even if you look at this, Climb has divided the entire topic into subparts. So we have 4 topics for the first module. So this is the first study unit of part. It is automatically divided into 4 submodules, which we will be covering in 2 sessions. So every time when you come to the class, have a look at the schedule. That's number 1. So you know what is it that we're going to cover in that class. In the class, please carry 2 marker pens, preferably a pencil or a colored pen, maybe a red pen. So I have done the cross references via red pens. I have added certain things so that the material becomes easier for you to grasp. So the idea is after we have covered a topic from our end, you should have prepared the entire material so that when you go back home and you start studying, it becomes very easy for you. The understanding part gets over. So come to my class with 2 colored marker pens, preferably a red pen or whatever color, but one color so that you would know that this is what I wanted you to write in the material. And after that, whatever additions you do or you write on your own, you write it with a pencil or some other color so that you can differentiate that this is what was written in the class and this is separate. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that I want you to do is after each section gets completed, so you would exactly know we have covered topics 1, 2 in the first class. So read that part, do it topic wise. Don't read everything first and then start taking the questions. Read that part, attempt all the questions from your database. Okay, I will show you how to use the database. But after you have read a particular part, do it from the MCQ and then mark the questions. Please flag the questions that you would want to revisit. Why does that happen? Because when you're going to revisit these topics, the flagging really helps. Don't flag everything. Try to be very selective about the questions. You should not be marking 10. Generally, you should not be marking more than 50% of the questions in any area. What happens if you have a problem in the class? Now, there are a couple of things that I want you to understand. If there is a problem in the class, first thing that generally I like all my students to follow is this. I would want you to just take a screenshot of the question and the answer, both, and put it on the group, the WhatsApp group that you have. The others who are in the session, they can answer. And in case if none of them answer, I will answer. Also, if you see, this is your question database. Okay. Now see, there is a particular question number. Even if that question number you give me, it will be easier for me to locate the question. I'll tell you how do you look at the question now. One second. I am on part 2. This everybody has got the codes, guys. I sent the codes to you guys. Everybody has it. Just raise your hand. Manali was already having it. Raji, you have the code? I
Got it.
emailed it to you today. You got it?
And activated also.
Okay, very good. Shreyas, you got the code? Did you activate it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So once you have the code ready, now see, I'll just run one of the topics. Okay. So this is the first subtopic. A couple of things, understand these numbers that you see here. So there are 2 ways to do it. I will always take the standard Gleim, but in your case, every time when you take questions, it should be on the randomized format. Okay. Now see, when I take a question, this is the number that is a unique number to the question. This 1.1.3. So it generally means it is study unit 1, first subunit of study unit 1 and the 8th question of that. So if you have to quote a question number to me, this is the question number that you have to quote, which is 1.1.2, 1.1.10. It's a unique number. The moment, so it's not 1, 2, 3, 4. It is It automatically tells you the subunit number, the unit number, and the question number. Okay. And this is how you flag the question. Okay. So this is how you flag the question. So what do? You read that part, do it topic wise. You don't do it for everything that has been done. Do it subtopic wise. So if I teach you business entities, go back home, read that part. You already have the markings ready. You would have done it in the session. Please come with a copy so that if you want to make any notes or something, you can do it. See, tax is a very technical subject. So ideally, I would not want you to make a pseudo book. Okay. That means I don't want you to just have a parallel book which you want to refer to. I want you to fall back on the main module that is given to you, which is the climb module. That's very, very important. Fall back on the main module. If you want to make some synopsis or some notes to abbreviate things, use post-its. But try to be on the book, guys. When you read it from the book a number of times, thing becomes very easy. And sometimes you will see you will start discovering newer meanings to the same things that you had read before. So try not to make an alternative note. Even if you want to make a note, see, most of my notes that I refer in the class, they are graphical. So if you want to abbreviate, it should be really abbreviated. It should not be like running into pages. Don't do that kind of a note making. Okay. So what do? Read that material from your part. When you're coming to my class, use different colored marker pens, a red pen preferably, to write whatever are the things that I want you to write. When you go back home, read that part, do all the questions. So read and attempt all the questions and mark the questions. Sometimes when you're attempting the questions, you will suddenly realize the meaning of certain things that you read in the book. Okay. Now, generally, the way I teach, I will refer, because see, I really don't feel that a topic like taxation can be taught without the questions. So most of my teaching will be based on practical questions, the MCQ questions that you will get. So once you have those questions, it will be easy. But still, just like I have cross-reference, if you want to cross-reference, you can do that as well. Okay. So do that, flag the questions, you're sorted. Now, I strongly suggest that every week you should be able to take one mock, maybe 20 questions, but just take a randomized mock of 20 questions from the areas that you have already covered. So how do you create a mock for yourself? Any questions till now, guys? How to use the interface? How to get to the Zoom link? Any questions? How to flag? Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Now see, how do you make your practice test? Now I would want you to do that, right? If you feel that you cannot post your marks on the common group, which I don't think is any problem, but if you feel, you give it to me in personal, I will see it. But I want you every week. So how do you make a practice test? See, one second. Yeah. So you can make a custom quiz. Can you see this is called a practice exam? You can create a practice exam for yourself out of the topics and subtopics that you feel you have done. So every week, no, I want this to be on a cumulative basis. Every week, I would ideally suggest a 30 or a 35 marks test that you can schedule for, let's say, 45 minutes. But it's up to you. But what I want is every week, one test out of all the topics. Let's say I have done 4 topics. You can take these 3 topics and then you can just create a randomized test for yourself. Okay. And just take it in a random order. Now, the problem is when they create a question, like you can choose the number of questions also. So make it 20, 25, 30, whatever you feel comfortable with. But run a test every week. It will put your mind in a condition where the MCQs will get easier and easier as you go ahead. So start covering it from base and then just make the test cumulative. Every week, run a cumulative test and share the screenshot with me in the either a common group or personal, whatever you're comfortable with. Ideally, if you put it on a common group, it is always better. Okay. So this is your preparation, your exam. Okay. Where do you, if you want to take some extra references, not needed, but in case if you want to know what are the forms, just to let you know, IRS have form downloads. So everything that you're reading. Now see, my aim is after you are through with entire sessions for EA, you should be able to navigate on your own and find out everything which is required. So this is the form. You get the form of download in this website. I'm going to share with you on the chat panel. So this is a website. This is a particular form, but if you just go to IRS form downloads, it will give you all the forms. So all the forms that I have given you, I'll show you where I have the forms for you. These are all the basic forms. Okay. If it is not too much of a problem, I would want you to have a physical copy of the form. It really helps because it gives you a visual immediately. Or if you're really averse to physical forms, then in that case, at least the master forms, I want you to have a physical copy so that it gives you a sense of control. Okay. So this is 1120. There is even the instruction. Right now it is huge. But my aim is that after this entire course is done, you should be able to navigate on your own and try to fill up as many forms as it's possible for you. Okay. Now, what I have done is, if you look at the general tab, I have downloaded all these forms and I've given it to you for your reference. These are downloadable forms. All you need to do is click on the start button, download all the forms. Okay. 1 second, I'll show it to you. One second. Have you guys seen the form? It is under the general tab. It's under the general tab.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So just under the general tab, I want you to download these forms. This is for the year 2022. When you download it, the entire folder will get downloaded. And this is how it will look like. Now, what are the forms that I would want you to at least keep a printout of? Right now, nothing. Okay, right now, nothing. Shreyas is the only one who's not taken part 1. Shreyas, unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Shreyas, I want you to take form 1040 also. Okay, I think you've already taken the printout for
Yes, ma'am.
that.
Yes, ma'am. I take it.
It will help you. And there is another schedule which is called Schedule SC, Schedule C. If you want, you can take a printout of this as well. Schedule C and D, you can take a printout because even if not a printout, I'll refer to it in the class. So you will find
Okay,
it
ma'am.
under part 1. Okay. I've given you access to part 1 also. So just download Schedule C because this is the sole proprietorship income that we're going to do. And Schedule D is capital gains that we're going to do. Okay. Apart from this, for all the others, if you look at businesses, I've put it under different folders. I don't want you to download all the forms, but at least the master forms, if you can download and keep it ready for you, it will be really great. I want you to follow it, either a physical copy or a soft copy, but I want you to follow this form as and when we are proceeding through the taxation. Okay, so it's very important that you don't study only to clear, you also study to understand. At the end of the entire course, you should be able to navigate on your own. Okay, any questions? Anybody till now? Any questions? Okay, we spoke about this. Okay, what I want you to do is this. See, in taxation, the biggest threat is the fact that it takes a lot of time for you to master a concept. So the way we should excel is by continuous revision. When you complete module 1 and you go to module 2, start revising module 1. Okay, now this is how I want you to manage your time. What I want you to do is this. For the first 2 weeks, that means starting from tomorrow, for the first 2 weeks, I want you to keep a time record. That means whenever you sit down to study, I want you to mention the start time, the end time, and keep it handy. Okay. Your aim should be that the 3 classes that I have in a day, you should be able to cover all the MCQs. Remember that, read the entire thing, cover all the MCQs, and mark. If you can do that with our sessions, that means for 1 week, 3 sessions of 2 hours each that we're taking, if you are able to catch up with me at your end, that means if you're able to read it and do all the MCQs in that time, I think it will be a really good thing because in the next 2 months, we'll be completing a full course of part 2. So what you should do is this. For the first 2 weeks, I want you to keep a record. Why do we want to do that? You will get a fair enough idea that if you have to follow with me in the class, how many hours would you want to put at your end? How many hours you are taking at your end? So once you have that time, then you can come up and say, okay, for one module, I am taking, let's say, 10 hours or 12 hours. Like that, I will suddenly start getting to understand what is my weekly time requirement. So first 2-3 weeks, I want you just to record your time. Understand how many hours you're taking to complete one module. So how many hours for you to read and then attempt all the questions, mark it. If you want to make mini notes, making all those mini, whatever it's needed, so that after that you will just revise. Whatever time you're taking, record that time. So that will give you a ballpark figure. I am taking 12 hours, 15 hours, 18 hours to complete 1 week's syllabus. The moment you know that, you know now how many hours you need to take in 1 week. In your schedule, Sundays are off. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There are 4 days which are off. On Sundays, keep a time for revision. So plan all your studies from Monday to Saturday. Sunday would be your revision time. You will revise everything that we have done and you're going to take a mock exam covering those areas. If you can do that for the next 2 weeks or next 2 months, I can assure you that within 1 month, you will be in a position to take your papers. So I repeat, read the thing once you go back home, do all the questions, mark the questions that you want to revisit. It is not very difficult to even put the questions. These are the question numbers so that you're handy with it. Okay, it's easy. All you need to keep is, okay, there are some running lists that I want you to make. Okay, I'm giving you a reference of the first one. These are the running lists that I want you to maintain. Okay, what do you mean by running list? See, this is one of the things that I want you to keep. One is form numbers. Every chapter will have form numbers. You will not need to learn all the form numbers, but make a Dhobi list of all the form numbers of every chapter. Don't do it in a written form. Do it on the laptop. It's easier for you to then mark it and understand which are the ones which are commonly tested. So every chapter will have some 10-12 forms. Make a composite place where all those 10-12 forms 10 forms per chapter can be written. So you will have a ready reckoner for one place where all the forms and the related material is needed. So in case if you have a due date, you can write it in the remark. Okay, this form is this due date. So keep one running list of forms. That's number one. And second, keep one running list of terms. There are a lot of terms which are important. Keep a running list of terms. This is what I'm not comfortable with. And then Google that term. The best part about this entire thing is a lot of data is in public domain. So if you want to learn, there are a lot of avenues where learning is possible. So keep a running list of the terms. So every time you encounter a term that you're not very accustomed to, just go back and Google it. Go back and Google it. Slowly, you will see that those terms will become easier for you. Keep a running list of the forms. If it's possible, keep a running list of what are the question numbers which are important for you. Because, it's easier for you to run the test. So when you do the revision, I don't want you to revise all the questions. I want you to revise only the marked questions. Now, how do you mark your questions? It is immaterial whether the question is right or wrong. I want you to mark, see, let's say I'm taking the first set of questions. Okay. Now, generally, you will see that even when I take my sessions, 1 second, that even if I take my sessions, I make it a point to do a lot of questions in the class. Okay. So after that, let's say I have 10 questions. When you mark those 5 questions, now how do you do the questions? Let me tell that to you. Let's say I take the first set of 10 questions. I take the 10 questions and I will choose standard climb order, but you have to choose randomized order. Okay. So run all the questions. When you're running, so this is the question. Okay. So even in the class, I will teach you how to read the question, take the call of the question, and then deselect 2 answer choices which are completely incorrect. Eliminate the third answer choice so that the last one will remain and it becomes the right answer for you. Now, let's say this was a question that I'm taking. First, you read the call of the question. Now, see, I want you to read all of these. I want you to understand why are the answer choices incorrect. why is one answer choice correct? So once you're doing the questions at your end, even for the questions that you're getting correct, please read the rationale behind why the others are incorrect. So once you do that, slowly, your mind will get accustomed to figuring out why certain areas are incorrect, why certain answer choices are correct. Are you guys with me? Are you able to understand it? Shreyas, is it okay? See, why am I
Yes, ma'am.
taking
Yes,
your
ma'am. I can
name?
understand.
Don't see, others have been with me in part one. That's the reason I'm taking your name. And they have, they've done it with me.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
that's the reason. Are you okay with what I've told
Yes,
you?
ma'am. I have understood.
Irrespective of, see, what I will teach you, I will try to cover a lot of MCQs there. But still, I want you to read the reasons why the answers are incorrect. So that you will know why exactly you're picking up the right answer. Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And then mark the question. If it is not too much for you, it's not a bad idea to just, take the question. So if out of 10 questions, mark only those questions that you feel is representative of the population. Now, why is marking very important? See, marking is important because you have to reduce your time for revision. So how do you reduce your time for revision? Instead of 10 questions, when you take the first revision, you will do only 4 or 5 questions. But those 4 or 5 questions should cover the entire essence of 10 questions. So don't base your selection on the basis of whether you're getting it right or wrong. Just base it on the basis of, if I do these 5 questions, have I covered the entire topic in details? If yes, 5 questions is good enough. Okay. Now, how do you find out which of these questions you have done and which of these questions? There's something called history. Okay. So when you go to history, you'll be able to see. So you go to history, and unfortunately, you don't know what is that session that you did. Okay. You just know the number of attempts. That's the reason why it might make a lot of sense if you can make a diary of which day you did which session. So let's say I did this right now. Okay. I can review this session, and when I'm reviewing it, it will tell me how many questions I did, what did I attempt, what was the correct answer. I can review that entire thing. Okay. So when I'm reviewing it, I would understand where I made mistakes. Okay. So it's important that you flag the questions, and you write what was the, 1 second, 1 minute. So see, when you go to history, do you see they don't give you what is a topic number? That's the reason if you can make a running list, something like this. See, if you can make a running list like this. See, if you can make a running list like this: study unit, date attempted, it will give you 2 dates or 3 dates, depending on how many dates you took. And then you can just write the questions, the subunit that you did, and the questions to cover. And you can just write the question numbers here: 1.1.5, 1.1.8, and so on. So that next time when you run the test, you can just choose those questions and then run the test. You can do that. Okay. Anything else, guys? You need 3 revisions, do it concurrently. Don't wait for 2 months to complete it and then start your revision later. You take such a lot of time to do it that it really makes no sense to drop anything that you've done. So cumulatively pick up things as you go along. Okay. Yeah. This was from my side for today, or for the orientation. Let's just say, anybody, any questions? Anybody, any questions? I've told you what to do, how to do. Yeah, Manali, tell me.
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody? Anybody, any questions? Then there's a small concept that I want to take today. We have time, okay? So let's take the small concept that's going to help you understand the basic differences between different entities. Okay. Now see. Yeah, is the whiteboard visible to everybody? Okay. Now see, if I have to make my business, okay, let's say I want to start a business. I started a business. I have given it a name called Pixalearn. Now, there are various ways in which I can formulate that business. So, if you guys have done business law, you will see that It's not today. It's long time back when the Contract Act was first made, some 1800s when the Contract Act was made. People realized, there's a very important case law called Solomon versus Fulton. Has anybody read this case law? Any idea? This is a part of business law. So this was the first case that established the concept of limited liability. What is limited liability? Now, when I make a business, let's say if we have here Raji and let's say Manali. Now see, both of them, they get into business. And what they do, Raji put in 50K from his side, 50,000. Manali put in 50,000 from her side. And then they approach a bank and the bank, let's say, gives them another 50K. Okay. So now they have a business, and in that business account, they have a share capital or partners capital, whatever way they have organized their business, would be somewhere around 100K. There will be a loan to the tune of 50K, and there will be bank, and the money would be lying in the bank account. Everybody clear with this till now? Everybody has an idea about accountancy? Everybody? Because we are going to use those concepts in business taxation. If your accountancy is a little poor, it will reflect in your C Corps taxation specifically. Shreyas, unmute.
Yes, ma'am.
This is clear.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
can, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Anybody, any questions? You just ask me in between. Okay. So now we have this 150K and we have this 150K. Now let's say what these guys did. They went and they purchased a lot of stuff. When they will purchase stuff, what will happen? We know it's a double entry system of bookkeeping. So what will happen? Eventually, the balance sheet will change. So what will the business balance sheet look like now? Let's say instead of 150K, they went and they, rented an office space and then they bought some machinery like that. So there'll be a lot of some assets. Let's say there's an office building that they are going to have or something. So like that, they will invest in certain assets and bank will come down and the capital will remain intact and they also will have to pay the loan. So the loan will also remain intact. Now, suddenly after all of this, let's assume for some reason they utilized a lot of their money, they invested in capital, and then suddenly the business went spoiled. They did not, suddenly COVID hit, the business model got completely, haywire, and the business started incurring losses. Now, see, there is a loan of 50K on their head. Even if the earnings become zero, let's say the entire bank account becomes completely zero. So see, when the bank account will become zero, let's say there's no money now which is left in the bank. Okay, let's say the bank account has become zero. Now we have certain assets, and let's say the bank account has become completely zero. Now let's say they're not able to carry on any business. If it is a limited liability business, it typically means that in case even if the business is shut, and let's say there is no liquidity in the business, still the bank is liable to recover 50K from whom? From both Raj and from Manali. From where? Now the business has no money. They can go and attach their personal properties. If Raji is, let's say, working in a company and he's drawing salary, the bank can go and ask the employer of Raji not to pay him the money and pay Raji. There are legal steps where these can be done. Why? Because the business is not having a separate entity. So the case law, which for the first time established it, was a British case law, which said that the company and the business are separate if you have filed the paperwork. Now, see, this is a very logical thing that happens. And that's the reason why sole proprietorship is the easiest form of business. You don't have to file anything. In India, if you want to start a sole proprietorship, you just go and get a Udyog Aadhaar probably, or you just go and file some, some kind of a municipal papers, right? You can get that trade license you get and you start your business. That's it. But the moment you want more safety, then you look for other forms of businesses. You go to partnership, you go to limited. So partnership again had the same problem. You would go and attach personal property. So you had unlimited liability. Then came the concept of limited liability. So there are two forms of businesses where you have limited liability. Can you tell me what are those forms? There are certain businesses where if I want to go for a situation where I have limited liability. What is limited liability? The money that I put it, I can lose this money. But beyond that, my personal assets will not be touched. So can you tell me a form of business where you have limited liability? Yes, write in the chat panel. Ask guys, where do you get limited liability? Which form of business allows you to just get your liability restricted to the amount of your investment, nothing beyond that? Yeah, we have C corps in India. These are public. So in India, we have this word limited, private limited company, public limited company. The term limited stands for limited liability. In the US, you have C corps, you have LLCs, limited liability companies. You have S corps, small corporations in the US. These are the three forms of businesses where the liability is limited. There is something called LLP also, which is limited liability partnership, which we will see. So you need to know what is the delta between LLP and LLC, and there's something called general partnership and limited partnership. What is the delta between each forms of business? Now, in which form of business do you think that the legal formalities will be very high? Any form of business which has the biggest protection to you. That means I'm saying if you file the paperwork, you can have limited liability. But the moment I say that, then the process of forming the company, the process of running the company, all of that also gets complicated. Why? Because you want an additional uh, burden off your head. So every time you are relieved of compliances, your liability goes up. And every time you want to safeguard yourself and limit your liability, my paperwork goes up, obviously, isn't it? Then you have to file the paperwork. Then you have to do a lot of compliances. You have to give some data to the MC. In India, it is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the MCA website. In the US, there are websites in which you have to give a regular data to SEBI. Now, what is SEBI? In India we have SEBI, which is Securities and Exchange Board of India. That's the organization that manages the share market and the companies who are listed on the share market, both primary and secondary. A body similar to SEBI in the US is the SEC, the Securities and the Exchange Commission. Okay, so the moment you have a limited liability company and the moment you're a C Corp, that means you're allowing the company to go to the common public and ask them to subscribe to your shares. The moment you do that, the paperwork increases substantially. You have to file the paperwork, you have to do some annual return filing, some quarterly return filing, the audit process is there. So all of that becomes mandatory. So always remember that the easier the form of business, higher is the liability, but least is the compliances. The more complicated forms of business that allows you to have limited liabilities would need more compliances and would need more paperwork because they want to ensure that you don't misuse. Is that clear? So tomorrow, when we are going to start the first topic, we are going to start the first thing with forms of business. What are the various forms of businesses that the company can get into? So if I want to start my business, what are the various options that are available to me? Now, there are two methods of accounting, the cash concept, the cash method, and the accrual method. And this is a very important topic for your EA syllabus. Okay, we are going to talk in great details about, one second. This is important. This is something that is going to be tested heavily. Essentially, this means what is the difference between the cash method versus the accrual method. So star this. This is the most important topic for our session in part 1. The others are simple. What is the accounting period? Generally, US is on fiscal year end. Now here you also have to, when you're doing this, pay special attention to due dates of filing returns. So when you're doing forms of business entities, Be very careful about what are the due dates of filing of the returns. And we're going to talk about what are the various ways in which a business can be incorporated, what are the plus points, what are the minus points. Also, we're going to specially discuss about the taxation impact. Which company pays tax, which company does not pay tax, and which form of business will have flow through taxation. All of that we're going to do tomorrow. So tomorrow, typically, we're going to cover a full business entity and nearly 80% of counting methods. Because once this is done, these two are really simple. So these are basic elementary topics for business taxation that we're going to start off on. Anybody, any questions? Anybody, any questions?